If all the lines in your solos are now I'm going to play an arpeggio, then I'm going to play a scale run, then that's not very exciting to listen to. I think you can imagine that there's a lot more going on in jazz melodies and jazz lines than just stringing together scales and arpeggios. In this video, I'm going to cover how you can make your lines and your solos more exciting and more interesting to listen to by surprising the listener. And you want to do this so that it sounds natural. You don't want to just end up with something that sounds weird and hard to understand. And in hindsight, I think this is really a lesson that I wish I had when I was starting to learn jazz and wanted to play better solo lines. My name is Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The first few examples are really about taking a scale run and then adding some things to it to make it more surprising and interesting to listen to. And then later in the video, I'm going to get into some other ways of making melodies that are a little bit more demanding, a little bit more complicated to work with. This first technique is really simple to figure out because we have a descending scale run. In this case, it's from C, the third, down to the root A. And then I'm adding a lower chord tone in between the C and the B. So really what I'm doing is that I'm taking a note out of the chord, out of the arpeggio, and then I'm adding that into my scale run. And then I get this, instead of just having. So you can hear there's a lot more happening just because we have this large interval skip in between. And if you listen to somebody like Benson, he does this all the time. And from here, I'm adding first a C major 7 arpeggio, and then a descending A minor 7 arpeggio run. But of course, you can also do this with other chord tones. Here's an example where I'm starting on the root and then I'm using the third of the chord as a note that I can insert into a scale run. This example is based around a descending scale run from the root A down to the third C. And what happens here is that I'm adding a third in there right after the first A. So I'm playing, instead of playing, I'm playing. So I'm adding the C in between the A and the G. And that's really just adding this skip in there. You want to have those skips in the line on the offbeat. They tend to sound a lot better and they kind of get overpowering if you put them on the beat. So they work a lot better if you just have them in between two heavy beats that are both in the main melody. A great way to just give this inserted lower chord tone a little bit more space and make it a little bit more important in the melody is to add just this short turn of a chromatic leading note. So that's what I'm doing in this example, still just A minor 7 and then starting on the third, going down to the E, so similar to the first example. But now I'm just adding a leading note down there, so going back up to the B and now adding some chromaticism here as well. Moving into a C major triad, and a little bit of chromaticism again, and then ending on the fifth. A guitar player that's really good at using this is Raney, and this is pretty similar to one of the examples that I cover in the video where I'm analyzing one of his solos on a B-flat blues. You can check that out, there's a link to that in the description. These techniques are really about changing the direction in your lines. When you start making these jazz lines, then usually you will just have everything going in one direction. You can play the scale one way or you can play the arpeggio, but you don't really have these sort of interesting turns where all of a sudden then you're skipping to another place and then still making a melody that makes sense, but also surprising the listener. And that's really what's happening with these inserted chord tones. And that's also what I'm doing in this example where I'm adding not just a chord tone, but actually a complete arpeggio. So again, I'm starting on the A minor on the C, and then I'm skipping down to the E, but then now I'm playing a complete triad going back up. So, and sometimes this is also referred to as the honeysuckle rose arpeggio. So it's a way of using octave displacement. But you can also just think about it as adding an arpeggio in between scale notes, which is what is happening here. So again, we have C, B, A as a descending scale run, and I'm playing the E minor triad in between the C and the B. And then continuing through making this one into a complete 2-5-1 line. So an F sharp diminished triad, flat 9, and then again skipping up to the flat 9 and then going back to resolve to the 5th of G major 7. And of course this technique will work with other chord tones as well, as you can see in this example. Here I'm not using the technique at the beginning of the line, so the first part is just a straight ahead bebop line. And then on the A I'm skipping down and adding the C major triad, so. And this really nicely takes me to the F sharp on D7. And then I make that into a flat 9. And then flat 13 and resolving to the 9th of G major. Another way of creating licks that are a lot less directional and therefore also a lot less predictable is to really think in sort of a slow moving top note melody and then just embellish around that and use that to sort of tie the whole thing together. So in a way what I'm doing in this line that's really heavily inspired by a George Benson lick is that I'm playing the A minor 7 and then really focusing on the B first, and then on the D7 taking that down to a B flat, so the flat 13, and then resolving it to the 9th on the G major 7. So that happens by first having a chromatic run and also a lower chord tone. So really framing that B in here, adding a descending arpeggio, back up. So I'm really still staying with this being sort of the top note melody, the important notes that are happening, and the rest is just sort of an embellishment. Flat 13, and then another descending arpeggio, resolving to the 9th, and then adding the 7th. And of course you can make a simpler version of this with some more basic arpeggios, and that will sound something like this. So the top note melody that I'm moving here is more or less just the G on the A minor going down to the 3rd of the D7, and then also the major 7 on the G major 7. So the first part is really just a descending A minor arpeggio, and then I'm going back up just to really emphasize the melody. That's the top part of this. And that takes me to the F sharp on the D7, diminished arpeggio, and then a small chromatic lick that's really emphasizing so the sharp 9 and flat 9, resolving to the major 7, and then adding the 5th under it. Another way of changing up things so that you're not just running up and down scales and arpeggios is to use pedal points, and that's what I'm doing in this example. So this first example is just on an A minor 7. I'm starting on the 9th, and then the pedal point that I have is on all the offbeats, and that's a lower E. So the scale melody that I'm using is really just B, A, and G, and then I'm adding the E in between. Moving into a descending A minor arpeggio, and then just a chromatic enclosure, and rounding off that line. And this same approach applied to a 2-5-1 would sound something like this. Here the pedal point is the root, the A, and I'm starting on the 5th, so the first part is really just a melody using an A minor triad, but using the pedal point idea, it sounds a little bit more interesting. And then on the D7, I'm using a similar technique to the sort of the top note melodies that I was discussing in the previous example. So first the A, then the B flat, so the flat 13, and then resolving to the 3rd of G major 7. If you want to work on writing your own jazz licks and get better at that, then you can also tell that it's probably really useful to really know the diatonic arpeggios, know the chord tones of the chords that you're improvising over, and really know the scales well. So if you want to check out some exercises that I think are really useful for this and that you actually need to be able to do, then check out this video where I'm going over different exercises, talking about what to focus on, what to practice, and what to make sure that you're learning from this process. Something that I really think you need to have in your daily routine.